Welcome to the Cardinal Newman Society podcast. I am your host, Kevin Murphy. The mission of the Cardinal Newman Society is to promote and defend faithful Catholic education. In the book of Genesis, God tells Adam that he is going to plant him in the garden to cultivate and to, quote, keep it. Keep also means to guard. Now, at the time, there's this bliss between God and man. So what would he have to guard it against? Well, the next chapter you find out when they're approached by the serpent. I say that because I see the similarities today in Christian pursuit of life, how it is increasingly becoming under attack, and how faithful Catholic education is constantly assailed by people trying to remake it into secular education or reduce our Catholicity. And so today I am joined by Greg Baylor from Alliance Defending Freedom, our friend, our cohort, our compadre in the very things that we're talking about, guarding and defending our Christian culture, our Catholic education system from those that would seek to attack it. So Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be with you, Kevin.
Greg, I know that there are so many things. First of all, what I need to do is we need to properly introduce you, but also properly introduce Alliance Defending Freedom. Let's start with you, Greg. So you have been with Alliance Defending Freedom. You're a senior counsel.
Yes.
And then what is your focus at Alliance Defending Freedom?
Yeah, so I do a lot of different things. Most people have just sort of one way of doing advocacy. They're litigators, they're legislative advocates, they're, in our marketing department, communications, whatever. But I've got my hands in a number of things. For most of the time at ADF, I was doing litigation, and I was doing a lot of work on behalf of faith-based educational institutions. During the Obama administration, I was responsible for handling a lot of our challenges to the HHS contraceptive abortifacient mandate. But then I got interested in legislative advocacy. There were some proposals going forward in Congress, so-called compromises that really were enormous concessions from, quote, our side. And I was very concerned about that because it was gaining some traction in the faith-based higher education world. So just by that happenstance, I got involved more heavily in congressional advocacy. And our current CEO, Kristen Wagner, came to me and said, hey, how would you like to do legislative advocacy on a more full-time basis? And so I started to do that. It's tough to do litigation and anything else.
Yeah.
But I still have my hand in litigation in the sense that I work with Christian educational institutions all the time, advising them. If there's a dispute that comes up, I help them handle it. If it needs to be litigation, I turn it over to the litigators. So I'm doing advising of schools. I do a lot of speaking engagements with Christian school associations. I do sort of proto-litigation at the beginning stages. And my legislative advocacy work has grown from not just the federal system, but the state system as well. So a lot of things, but yeah.
And so you're as we talked about at the beginning, the defending Christian values and defending those things. Alliance Defending Freedom has a very beautiful mission. I'd like you to just share it with us. And then they break it down into specific parts.
Yes.
5 parts.
Yes.
And I want to just touch on each of those right off the bat.
Yeah, sure. So, the mission of Alliance Defending Freedom is to protect and defend the right of all people to speak and live out the truth.
Let's stop and let's absorb that a moment because, mission statements, like a lot of things, are things that people overlook.
Right.
That is like you have to unpack what you just say that again if you can, Greg. Say that one more time.
Yeah, our mission is to defend and protect the right of all people to speak and live out the truth.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And we changed our mission statement. An earlier version of the mission statement was focused on freedom, and not to diminish the importance of freedom. It's in our name, Alliance Defending Freedom. When we believe in freedom, religious freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of association, and we believe in it for people of all faiths. But freedom to do what? That's an important question. And we decided that we need to emphasize the freedom to live out the truth. Now, that doesn't mean we don't work with religious folks who have a different understanding of the truth, but we know that there is a truth. And we want people to have the freedom not just to profess it, not just to believe it in their heads, but to live out their faith. And that's what's under attack in so many venues right now.
And let's go over those 5 areas, if we could, Greg, because the 5 areas are all very near and dear to the heart of the Cardinal Newman Society. So let's take, obviously, the first one is religious freedom.
Right. We call them generational wins.
And why is that? Generational win.
It's because sometimes it takes a generation to achieve them. One of the things that is sort of part of the culture of ADF is that we're playing the long game, and we're playing to win, not just to show up, not just to be present, but to actually have some success. And we're not presumptuous about it. We know that God is the key, right, to whether there's success or victory. But we have to have optimism and hope, reasonable optimism and hope. But we do want to achieve victories, not to just show up. So, and
you know, that's funny because you say that. Advocacy is often relegated to that very thing. Right?
Yeah.
Get attention, show up, you win or lose. Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah.
That's all good and well, but let's just show up and get a lot of attention. And so when you say that, again, this is, gosh, you're hitting on so many things that are so powerful. This is a small thing, but also massive. Yep. It's a different way of looking at things. When you say we're playing for the long game, I know the people that are arrayed against us.
Yes.
And they are playing for the long game.
Yes, absolutely.
They don't care. If you look at the way things shift, almost sometimes imperceptibly, to where the point where you look up and go, how did we get here?
Yep.
Right? Isn't that what happens with the erosion of our faith, of people taking it? You know, companies do this, mission drift, all the time. Yeah. So I mean, that's a very powerful thing, I think. So that's wise of you guys to think of it like that.
Yeah, I think there's a mindset among some in the faith community that there's going to be one day this big battle that's going to decide all of these issues. And that's just not how it works. To be sure, there are important landmark, for example, Supreme Court cases, Roe versus Wade, the overruling of it in the Dobbs case. But really the way things change is slowly. I wouldn't say imperceptibly, but if you're not paying attention, it feels imperceptible.
And most people don't.
Right.
I mean,
they have lives.
That's right.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to legal issues, you know, I mean, they're getting this haze. They see like you say, they'll say something, Hobby Lobby versus so-and-so, and they black out. Right. They don't really think about what is involved in it and the consequences thereof.
Yes, that's right. So we try to get involved in as much as we possibly can. We try to be strategic, even though God has blessed our organization with tremendous resources. They're not unlimited. So we try to be strategic in the matters that we focus on, cases or legislative advocacy.
So the first one is religious freedom.
Yeah, religious freedom. Free speech. We believe in free speech. We have represented, for example, Turning Point USA in a number of problems that they've had on campus, dozens of TPUSA chapters. We've worked with Christian student organizations that are facing problems getting recognition because they, quote, discriminate, because they want their leaders to share their views. So free speech. We also believe in the sanctity of human life from conception to natural death. And so we're fighting for laws that will protect unborn human life and protect the vulnerable at whatever stage of life they're at. Parental rights. We believe very strongly in parental rights. Obviously, there's a close connection between religious freedom and parental rights. A lot of parents, the things that they kind of confront difficulties over, a lot of times it's because it's motivated by their faith, but it is a distinct thing. And legally, parental rights are a distinct thing as well. And of course, the marriage and the family. We believe in God's design for marriage. We believe in God's design for family, God's design for sexuality, God's design for the distinction between the sexes. So those 5 areas, it's a lot.
Alliance Defending Freedom is popular. I mean, I can tell you in today's culture, you're hitting on every major issue there is with those 5 generational things. I mean, that's, and again, I think you're right about it. The one thing I love about it is your vision for understanding that any individual one case can make a powerful difference. But that underlying issue, just like the idea of the sanctity of life,
right?
Look at what's happened over that in the last 30 years with that. Is that gone away? Even though those cases have been decided? No. And those people that have had that want that to be changed, they're still heavily at it. They're working very hard.
Yeah, no, the Dobbs case really just gave states and the federal government an opportunity to do something about abortion. It didn't make abortion illegal. It didn't by itself impose any restrictions on the abortion license. And we're seeing it in some states where they're doubling down and they're creating stronger, quote, protections for the right to terminate a life, an unborn life, than ever existed under the Roe versus Wade.
Wow.
One of the ways also we're able to be involved in so many things is because we are an alliance. I mean, that is the first word in the name of our organization, and it always has been. We have thousands and thousands of allied attorneys. They're not employees of ADF. We work closely with other organizations. For example, I talked about state legislative advocacy, state Catholic conferences, state family policy councils. We work with folks in big law and the big law firms. It's just amazing. It truly is an alliance. And, it's not just about ADF.
Yeah. How does that work? If you're somebody out there and you want to, is it just a collaboration when you say an alliance? How does that work?
Yeah. Well, for years, ADF, and they continue to do this, we host events for attorneys who are interested in becoming allied with ADF. They used to call them litigation training conferences. I was fortunate enough to be on the faculty of those for many years. And people learned about the issues, the substance of the issues, and about sort of how to handle these, because constitutional litigation is a relatively specialized thing. But there are lots of ways folks can become allied attorneys. We have something called the Blackstone Fellowship, which is for law students. It starts with law students, students who are in the summer after their second year of law, or first year of law school, rather. They get connected with ADF. It's a competitive application process. They sit at the feet of scholars and theologians and learn, and then they have a practical experience, whether it's in an ADF office or in the office of an ally, or maybe in a judge's chambers, and then they come back and talk about career options. And ADF stays with these folks for years. And now we have this phenomenon where we started Blackstone as a dream in like the late 1990s. And there are Blackstone fellows who are federal appellate court judges, state Supreme Court judges.
The generational view,
right? The
right?
generational view, the long game, playing the long game to win.
So at Alliance Defending Freedom, you have obviously been partners and great help to the Cardinal Newman Society, because our goal sounds like yours, and the things that you stand for sound very much like ours, because in promoting and defending faithful Catholic education, all those issues come into play. Parental rights. We talk a lot about, the right to life. We talk a lot about those issues, and it's important for us, especially in sharing the view with parents about what true faithful Catholic education is. And so there's a lot of similarities in our two organizations. Now, you guys began in 1993, 94, you said.
That's right,
when you actually became an entity.
Yes.
When did you join?
Well, I joined ADF in 2009, but I joined the movement, as it were, in 1994. I started my work in this area at Christian Legal Society, one of ADF's allied organizations, in the Center for Law and Religious Freedom. It's kind of a funny story how I got connected with that. I was a new convert. I was just fresh out of law school, and I had always wondered about the truth claims of Jesus Christ, but I had never really explored them fully. I never had sort of emotional connection with the Lord, but that happened. That happened for me. And almost immediately I started thinking about, is there a way I can combine my newfound faith and my, 3 years of law school education and relatively small amount of legal experience? Is there something that I can do? And, back then, this was 1993. You couldn't just Google it.
No, and it wasn't.
Yeah, the only people using the internet was like the Defense Department and the CIA and maybe some others, but there wasn't anything you do. So, but It's amazing how the Holy Spirit works, especially when you look in retrospect how He guides your steps. I was driving to the beach in Delaware at the time. I lived in Washington D.C. and literally thinking about this question. Gosh, I don't know what to do, and the show pops on. And I was focused on the family. It was Jim Dobson, who of course recently passed away, and he had a show called "Where Are the Christian Lawyers?"
Wow.
And I just about fell out of the car. I raised my hand. I'm like, I'm here in a car on Route 53. Exactly. Yeah. So they had a lawyer in private practice at a law firm. They had a dean of a Christian law school, and they had someone from Christian Legal Society Center for Law and Religious Freedom, which I just mentioned I worked at. And I was very intrigued by that, by the work that they were doing, and got connected, and here we are.
You said it, I think, very well, and that is the movement of the Holy Spirit to say to you, how can you take the skills that you have and put them to work in this kind of an environment? Because many people don't. They sectionalize their life, right? Like that's the religious side of my life. I may do that on the weekends or whatever.
Yeah.
But then you say, okay, but how do I bridge those? How do I bring those two together?
Yeah.
And that's a great calling. Now God answered you in that by leading you down this path to Alliance Defending Freedom. And now Alliance Defending Freedom, which began about the same time as the Cardinal Newman Society, is how big?
We have offices all over the world. I don't know the latest employment number, but it's over 450 employees. The budget is phenomenal. God has just truly been a blessing. We're blessed with great leadership and a lot of talented people who have made that happen. And, we're a Christian organization. Everyone who works there professes faith in Jesus Christ. We take that seriously.
I think you use the Apostle Creed for your statement of faith.
We do.
Correct?
It's a statement of faith that both Catholics and Protestants and Orthodox can sign. So we're an ecumenical organization in that sense. But our reach is global. We have offices in Europe and in Asia, and the work that we do is in Africa and Oceania. India.
It's a testament to the vision of the organization, but it's also a testament to the need.
Yes.
Is it not?
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of reluctantly those things are becoming more and more pressing, right?
Oh, yes.
What we think of in terms of these issues, religious freedom, parental rights, sanctity of life.
Yeah.
Those aren't going away. Those are perennial issues that just keep presenting themselves. They may have nuanced presentations to them, but they're there.
And what happens overseas impacts here, and what happens here impacts overseas. So we have to be paying attention. And frankly, some of the things that are happening overseas, now I'm not in our international operation, but people are dying. People are being martyred because of their faith, and ADF is trying to step in and try to address some of that. So yes, the problems in the United States are very, very serious, but some of the problems overseas are more, tangibly just tragic in a way. Yeah.
Greg, you've spoken at our event, our Newman Guide College Leaders Conference, and then we're also doing our Newman Guide Leaders Summit this year, actually at Catholic University of America here, located in D.C. And one of the things is this religious freedom issue just keeps presenting itself. Yeah. You've been heavily involved in that. In your estimation, for people that are listening to this, let's first talk about from a parent's perspective.
Right.
What do they need to know?
Yeah.
What should they be thinking of when they hear that? Because again, I don't want people to be dissuaded because these terms somehow end up sounding legal.
Right.
A lot of people just glaze over when you start doing that, because underneath that is powerful things that shape the culture.
Yes.
So what would you say to a parent in terms of religious freedom that they should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think the first thing to recognize is you do have rights. A lot of times a parent will discern something that's saying, this doesn't seem right to me. And then it stops there for many, not for all, of course. But there are really powerful, potent legal protections that the law provides, the Constitution, state constitutions, statutes, that are provided to parents as parents, right? Mm-hmm. Parental rights. And a lot of times, unfortunately, threats to parental rights come in the educational setting, particularly at public schools. It was a big Supreme Court victory that our allies and friends at the Beckett Fund achieved, where they were teaching, instructing about LGBTQ issues in Montgomery County, Maryland. And there were so many parents there. And it was an interesting coalition, too. It wasn't sort of your standard traditional Catholics, evangelical Protestants. A lot of Muslim families objected for religious reasons to some of the instruction that their kids were experiencing. And so many parents wanted to opt their kids out, and good for them for trying that the school said, there's just too many of you opting out, so we're not going to allow anyone to opt out. But there was a recognition there, something is wrong here, and I have rights. And so I think that's really one of the starting points, is that there is recourse, there is a remedy, and there are groups like ADF and its allies who are willing to help.
Yeah, and that is the idea, that these parents should trust themselves in that sense. If they feel there's something wrong, they should actually raise a question about that, right? You know, unfortunately, people they just want to go about their life, and they don't want people to disrupt them. You know, but in this particular case, whenever you have that feeling, you should voice it. You should say something's not right about this, because you could probably uncover that there's a lot more people, as you said, in alliance with you than you know.
Yeah, we had a situation up in New England where this young man, in response to what was being taught to him about the distinction between the sexes and all the gender ideology that they were foisting upon the kids, he wore a shirt that said, "There are two genders. There are only two genders." And they told him he couldn't wear that shirt. And he comes back the next day. I thought this was pretty clever. He said, and he put a piece of tape over the word two genders, and it said censored genders. And he got in trouble for that. And, we took that case to court. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out the way it should have. But the parents there recognized, I think the child recognized, this is America, right? We have free speech, even in the school setting. And they did something about it. So I think that recognition, that instinct that you have, follow that, listen to that, and see if help is available.
Now, from a perspective of companies, this is something, especially for Catholic educators. You know, there's this. I always think of it almost in the terms of the little phrases that are in the mouse type at the end of ads. You know, those little things that have all the real things you can and cannot do at the very end, but you can't even see it because the type's so small. It's the same thing with companies. They have this almost working from a negative, like, okay, well, we don't want to discriminate, so therefore. And so they always put themselves in a negative. How can we change that mentality? How can we tell people they do have these rights? And this idea of discrimination, it's such a bad word that you don't want to be a person who discriminates. But being discriminating is not a bad thing.
No. It depends on the circumstances, of course. But when a Jewish synagogue wants their rabbi to be Jewish, or a Catholic church wants the priest to be Catholic, at some level that's discrimination. I wouldn't call it discrimination, right? Because there's nothing invidious about it. There's nothing inappropriate about it. If McDonald's says you can't work here because you're Hindu or Sikh or something like that, that's obviously wrong. That's genuine discrimination. But I think people are kind of spooked a little bit by this. And I mean, I had an interesting conversation with some folks at a Catholic educational institution, and they were really surprised to learn that it was entirely legal for them to say, we want to admit Catholic families, Catholic students. They just assumed, understandably, given the sort of what's in the cultural water right now, that they couldn't do that. So one of the things that we're trying to educate people about is, do you have more rights maybe than you think? And, we do that in a bunch of different ways. ADF has a mission, a ministry called the Church Alliance, the Ministry Alliance, that folks can join. And one of the services that it provides is to provide education about your rights, in addition to providing really concrete advice about how to structure your documents in a way that position you best if ever a controversy comes along. But then also, one of the reasons we like to publicize the cases that we do is to show that A, people have rights, organizations have rights, schools have rights, and B, that there is a remedy for it. So we have a purpose. It's not just to try to glorify ADF or whatever. It's really about getting the message out. You have rights and you have people willing to help.
Yeah, if you have the case as a highlight, here's what happened in this case, and here's what what we did.
Yeah.
Is that people can finally say, you know what, that sounds similar to what I've gone through.
Yeah.
You know, people often see themselves in other people's actions. You know, we had a gentleman on here on the podcast by the name of Tony Scarpo, and his daughter's, issues that she had at her Catholic high school, and he sued them. Well, suddenly that got, international attention, and people started calling him, so much so that Tony, had never positioned himself as an expert in that way, but he was taking calls from all over the world.
Wow.
Of people who were in the same predicament as him.
Yeah.
Now, from a perspective for Catholic educators, people that are running Catholic schools,
Yes.
people that are running Catholic universities, what are some of kind of the aha moments that they should know about right now so that they could run their schools not only to be firmly Catholic,
Yes.
but feel secure in doing so?
Yeah. I think first there needs to be a recognition that you have freedom, and you may have more freedom than you think. I think getting good advice from attorneys, whether it's ADF through our Church and Ministry Alliance or elsewhere, is really critically important. I think one of the important things that schools can do is to make sure, as I mentioned a minute ago, that their documents are in order. They are as good as they possibly can be. Their employment practices. What are you going to say in interviews? What are your facilities use policies? What is your policy about athletics and, the distinction between boys and girls? What about faculty? What about, conduct standards for
we should just merge. Because when I hear that, I can see Denise Donahue over your shoulder going, yes, yes, yes. Because, we ask those very same things in order for a school or college to become Newman Guide recommended.
Yeah.
If you're going to become Newman Guide recommended, you have to abide by a certain type of curriculum. You also have to have policies in place, the very policies that you're speaking of. We have an athletics policy, a literature policy, a sexuality policy.
Yeah.
A lot of times, I think people, again, and maybe this is the legal aspect again, once sneaking in there, they hesitate because they think, this is going to be costly, right? I got to call a lawyer, and a lawyer's going to come in, he's going to charge me crazy amount of money. How can you work around that? Is that true even?
Well, you can hire lawyers who will charge, and I don't want to say anything negative against lawyers in private practice, but there's just a different economic calculus that happens there. But if that's the right thing for a school to do, that's what they should do, especially if they have somebody they can trust. There are other options. ADF and its allies offer these services, some of them for free, some of them at a discounted price. ADF has its Ministry Alliance, which schools can join. The dues depend on the size and budget of the organization. I would say that they're modest. I've had conversations, or actually people get up in events and give a testimonial saying, yes, it costs a little. I'm not here to do an advertisement for this, but it's just they get up and they say, the amount of money that I paid for it in comparison to what I got was incredible. And so and the people who work for our Ministry Alliance are so talented, and this is what they do all day. Right. Yeah. So they know the right way to word a policy.
And that actually saves you money. In the long run, a person that really knows what to do cuts through the bureaucracy and gets right to this is what you need to do. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah. Right. Now, you mentioned something I really want to get back to. You say, okay, it should be inherent in everything you do. Yes. Right. The cases that Catholic organizations have taken and Alliance Defending Freedom has participated in, the ones that are successful are the ones that are thoroughly Catholic throughout.
Yes.
Those ones that sometimes maybe have a little Catholicity woven in, maybe not. Maybe they don't hire that way. Maybe they don't insist upon, people abiding by that. Give the difference between those two approaches, because I can tell you that in the older days, people used to think, well, we want to be Catholic, but we don't want to be too Catholic, right?
Yes.
Because if we're too Catholic, we're really going to get in legal trouble.
Yeah.
But that's nonsense, right?
It really is. Also, these days, people say, all right, I don't want to be a target. You are already a target. Look around. You can't just hide from all of this. Folks on the other side of these issues are well-resourced. They're aggressive. They're persistent. And your attempt to hide is almost certainly not going to be successful. You are right. The schools that are unabashedly Catholic in everything that they say and do are less likely to get in legal trouble. It seems counterintuitive. I can give you a couple of examples of this, and I'm going to name names because these are court cases that are in public.
Please do.
Catholic Relief Services in Maryland is in litigation, and it was because they were not consistently Catholic in their hiring policies. They hired someone who was in a same-sex relationship, which it's interesting that they did that in the first place. But then the person they hired said, "Can I get health insurance benefits for my same-sex spouse?" And at first they said yes, and then they said no. Well, this is a recipe for getting sued, and they did. And years later, they're still in litigation. Fuller Theological Seminary was giving mixed messages to students about their views on same-sex marriage. And they got sued. And they prevailed in that case, but it was a difficult process. It was not flattering public relations wise. I'm not sure if it cost them any money with lawyers because they had an allied attorney group working with them. But it's really you got to be committed both in what you say and what you do. Having a policy on a piece of paper sitting on a shelf is necessary but not sufficient.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
As logicians would say. It's not enough. You got to do more.
So, what I first think of when I think of this is the disconnect between what happens in the HR department. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes HR, I think they have these things like, especially those disclaimers about non-discrimination type things, but they don't know what they can and cannot do in the HR process. And they don't know that they have to make sure that they're hiring and the way they hire and the way they onboard and the way they evaluate.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Should all be in accord?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have discovered, I hate to overgeneralize, but I think this is true, that there's greater comfort in the Protestant world. There tends to be more employers that say everyone has to be a professing Christian, right? From the CEO to the janitor and everybody in between. I think I've encountered a mindset among many Catholic organizations like, oh, no, we can't do that. And
Now, why is that?
I don't know where this is coming from.
You have the experience of going with all the different people at different levels and Protestants and Catholics. Why is that?
I honestly don't know why that is. I know that like back in the 70s, there was a lot of pressure to secularize among educational institutions, particularly at the higher ed level. Like New York is a classic example. They had and still have a program called Bundy Aid, which provides tuition assistance to students. And they have a restriction and exclusion of like, you just can't be too religious. Otherwise, you can't get the money. Now, that's an outdated, archaic understanding of the Constitution. But at the time, it was a real thing. And I think some Catholic institutions, they had a choice. They could either say, look, we're going to preserve our identity and we're not going to change in order to qualify this money. And there were others that said, you know what, we really want to get this money, so we'll still be Catholic. But it doesn't end up working out that way. So I don't know, maybe that has something to do with it. But,
that's great.
Yeah.
There's one of the more famous papers written on strategy was written by a Harvard business professor way back in about the time that I think both our organizations were launching. And he said there is always going to be trade-off, and you have to be willing to accept that. The very fact that you're doing more of one thing means you're doing less of something else, right? Yeah. So it's the same thing here. If you're going to be a faithful Catholic institution, you are going to have some people that say, well, I don't want to give to you because you're a faithful Catholic institution.
Right.
Great. Then go to the people who do want to give to you.
Yeah.
Right? And there's plenty of those out there.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing, I think, in this case. So now we've looked a little bit about, let's say, parents. We've talked a little bit about some of the businesses. One of the things I want to get to is this idea of ministerial exception.
Okay, sure.
this idea that I think today there's always these pollers that people pay just enough attention to think that they can claim something.
Yes.
And in ministerial exception, could you explain what that is? And then do the yeoman work of saying who exactly is covered under ministerial exception.
So the ministerial exception is a defense that a religious organization can use when it gets sued by an employee or an applicant for employment, primarily when they're alleging discrimination on some basis. Okay, so it is a defense. And if the person in question is a minister, the organization is not liable. Now, what's interesting about the ministerial exception is that it protects you from any claim of discrimination, not just religious discrimination, not just sexual orientation, gender identity, whatever discrimination. It protects employers from claims of race discrimination, national origin discrimination, sex discrimination, disability discrimination. That's how potent this doctrine is. And it's not so much like, the organizations have a religious need to discriminate on the basis of race or disability or whatever. The idea is that the government should not get involved in employment decisions about ministers. This is a sphere, a space where the government doesn't belong. So it's important to understand that. People get confused because there are other protections in the hiring context. For example, Title VII is the federal law that forbids discrimination in employment on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin. It has a religious exemption.
You do have those memorized.
I've been marinating in this for decades, so I can't help it, right?
You can tell how you're just ticking that off your mind really easy.
But there's an exemption in there, but it doesn't say you're exempt from this statute. It says you have the freedom to hire people of a particular religion. Well, that doesn't mean a particular race or whatever.
Right.
There are debates about the sexual orientation stuff, but you have to understand that there are different defenses available to you. And again, like as you were asking and as I was suggesting, the real key question is this person a minister? And I think, when people hear minister, they think clergy right away. It is clergy, but it's not just clergy.
Yeah, and it can be quite extensive.
It can be, yeah. There was a case recently that demonstrates, I think, the breadth of the ministerial exception. World Vision is an evangelical relief agency worldwide. People support kids through it. It's just an incredible organization. And they have customer service representatives who talk to people who are interested, for example, in sponsoring children. These folks have to be Christians. These folks have to follow the conduct standards that World Vision has. They are representatives. In some ways, they are the face of the organization, even though they might be at a certain spot in the organizational chart, even though they're not compensated as well as the CEO. But they are, to many of World Vision's constituents, the face of the organization. Yeah. And they have policies about who they're going to hire. If you're in a same-sex relationship, they're not going to hire you. So this happened. They got sued, and one of the defenses that they asserted was the ministerial exception. And the big fight was, are these people ministers? And what it comes down to, and the Supreme Court has said this multiple times in the last few years, is the person communicating the organization's religious message. So for these customer service representatives, the answer is absolutely yes. For educators, I think faculty at K through 12 schools are ministers. I think we'd say all of them. I think there's a little bit of a debate at the higher ed level, right, about whether someone who teaches chemistry is a minister. I think it depends on the circumstances. Yeah. I mean, if you're doing what you say you're doing, which is to integrate faith into everything, then yes, that person is a minister. Now, on the other side of it, there are people who aren't ministers, right? And sometimes there's a temptation for an employer to say, well, I'm just going to
blanket the whole thing.
Everybody's a minister. You're probably not going to prevail in some of those cases, number one. And number two, remember what I said before about the potency of the ministerial exception. You're telling a person that if I discriminate against you on the basis of race, you can't sue me. So, and that can create problems. I would understandably be upset if I were that employee. So there's an employee relations thing that when you're deciding in advance, now your say on who's a minister is not the ultimate answer. It matters, but it's ultimately the court's decision. So I think there's some care needs to be taken, but the bottom line is minister is a much broader category than the word suggests.
Now, Greg, you've traveling the chain of Protestant and Catholic focusing in on these issues,
Yes.
which Protestants and Catholics hold in common, your Apostles' Creed, which is this mission of statement for your entire entity.
Yes.
You've kind of, let's say the old wide world of sports, you've spanned the globe,
Yes.
right? What are the lessons you think Catholic organizations should pay particular attention to and should A, either change
Yeah.
or B, integrate as quickly as possible
Yeah.
so that they insulate and protect themselves?
Yes.
What are some of those things?
Yeah. Well, two things. I mean, there's enormous threats out there to the right to form your communities. And this comes from the application of non-discrimination rules. And when I say form your communities, I'm talking about employees, or in the case of an educational institution, your students. And that is under attack in a lot of ways. There are some states that used to have robust religious exemptions for religious employers, and they're trying to shrink those now because they granted those where they recognized those exemptions back in the 90s when it was more politically necessary. If, for example, you wanted to pass a law forbidding sexual orientation or gender identity discrimination. So Maryland recently just did that, and other states are revisiting it. There are efforts to reinterpret existing bans on sex discrimination to reach sexual orientation and gender identity. So you might live in a red state that has never added sexual orientation, gender identity to its non-discrimination law. You have administrative officials, you have judges saying, oh, those are already in there because the word sex is in there. And the Supreme Court itself has accepted that argument in the context of a federal statute. Now we're starting to see, and we talked about our friends on the other side being clever and persistent, disability discrimination laws are being used. The argument is that gender dysphoria is a disability that you need to be accommodated. So I think, that's point one of the answer, which is that there are a lot of threats out there to your freedom to form your community along religious lines. The second is you have a lot of rights to do that. Like I said, the Title VII, the federal law, top to bottom, you can prefer people. You can select exclusively people who share your faith. And a lot of and there's the ministerial exception and all these other defenses. I would say this, too, that you're less likely to get in trouble when you have a consistent policy top to bottom. Now, there are reasons not to require every employee to be Catholic, and I respect that, and it's a case-by-case determination. But there are advantages to having a policy that's sort of company-wide or goes deeper into the org chart than maybe it does now, and you have pretty solid legal freedom to do that. So I hope that's a helpful answer.
It is. And what I'd like to do, Greg, is I'd like to just take a short break and come back. There are so many things. I mean, we could go on and on. And because you don't have your own podcast yet at ADF, we're going to invite you back numerous times to touch on these issues, because I cannot stress enough that in Catholic education as a whole, we need to understand the legal issues. We need to be able to say to ourselves, what rights do we have? And do we clearly understand them? Because in order to not only preempt some action against you, you should be fortified with the right policies and the right things in place. And then if something does happen, we want to give them the way, to be able to contact Alliance Defending Freedom, to be able to enlist you guys for help. So thank you, and God bless your work.
Thank you.
Let's come back in just a few minutes. We'll pick this back up, okay?
Sounds like a plan.
If you'd like to learn more about how you can help promote and defend faithful Catholic education, go to cardinalnewmansociety.org. Also, if you're interested in promoting and defending faithful Catholic education wherever it is found, subscribe to the Cardinal Newman Society podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.